Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host TJ Mabardi. Today is Friday, February 2nd, and today we are going to be getting into the NBA All-Star teams as we finally had the reserves announced last night. So I'm going to be giving my thoughts on who was snubbed, and then we are likely to have a couple of injury replacements taking place, at least in the Eastern Conference. So I'll be talking about what I think the NBA should do as far as replacements there. Then we're going to be talking about LeBron James and the LA Lakers, who just had a big upset win last night, and yet the story was more so surrounding. There was a lot of speculation online, at least, about LeBron James's future with the Lakers after some cryptic messages that he sort of put out into the media and then missed yesterday's game. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that game, but more so big picture what the rest of this season and going forward looks like for LeBron. Then we are going to be moving on to the New York Knicks, who have been putting together an incredible stretch of basketball. Ended January very hot, extending into last night's win in the comeback game against the Pacers, now up to 9 straight wins for them. And then finally, we are going to be ending the show talking about the New York Jets, who The Athletic put out an article earlier this week, I should say, about the Jets and the dysfunction that has gone on in their locker room. So we'll be getting into all of that. But before we do, just a reminder to like and follow. And for any of our live streamers, just remember to use the comment section, make this show as interactive as possible. And if you would like to tip, just to use the link that is streaming across the bottom ticker, that is streamelements.com/gsmcsports./tip. So without further ado, getting into the first segment here and talking about the NBA All-Star teams. As I mentioned last night, the reserves were announced for both the Eastern and Western conferences. We got the All-Star starters last week. So to recap that, starting in the Western Conference, the starters are Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Luka Doncic, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Nikola Jokic. So no surprises there. The reserves that were announced last night: Devin Booker, Steph Curry, Anthony Davis, Anthony Edwards, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and Karl Anthony Towns. In the Eastern Conference, starting for them, it is Tyrese Halliburton, Damian Lillard, Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Joel Embiid. Embiid, obviously, with the injury, so he will likely be unable to play in this game. And then the reserves that were announced last night, it was Tyrese Maxey, Bam Adebayo, Paolo Banchero, Jaylen Brown, Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell, and Julius Randle. So we have 3 first-time All-Stars in the Eastern Conference between Maxey, Brunson, and Paolo. So always fun to see there. And then, as I mentioned, Joel Embiid and also Julius Randle, both currently dealing with injuries that will likely keep them out of the All-Star game. So there are going to be some replacements there. Quick note that I found to be interesting was that there are 7 Kentucky Wildcats selected to the All-Star game this year, and that makes the most that any one college has been represented in an All-Star game in NBA history. So just a fun little nugget there that I found. Talking about first the replacements for the Eastern Conference, I think that the way that I would do this and sort of reconstruct this roster is I would promote Bam Adebayo to be a starter in the Eastern Conference and take that Joel Embiid spot. And there are 2 spots that need to be filled. I feel like the first one here is kind of inarguable, which would be Trae Young for me. He's averaging 27 and 11. He is 10th in points per game and second in assists per game. And Trae Young has never been my favorite player necessarily. I think that some of his play style, it used to be very heavily reliant on free throws. Not that free throws aren't still a part of the game, but he was sort of one of the main catalysts, in my opinion, of the NBA, trying to iron out some of these shooting foul calls on the perimeter of jumping into guys. I thought that he sort of specialized in that in some ways. And, you know, the defense has never been good with him. Now he's actually having a better season, I would say, this year on defense than in the past, although the Atlanta Hawks as a whole have been very much struggling. And for that reason, I think people are just sort of over the big statistic games from Trae Young, even though I think that this year he's been more unselfish and has actually been trying to produce more winning basketball than in years past, where it used to be a ton of usage for him. It was just him with the ball and sort of the rest of the group watching. Now, since they have added DeJounte Murray, maybe it's been that he feels like he doesn't have to quite as much. And again, it's not like the results have necessarily been there. They are 20 and 27. They are technically in the play-in tournament area, but they are not a good team right now. And as a result, they are looking to potentially move DeJounte Murray and try and reconcile some of the assets that they gave up for him a couple years ago. But I think that we're talking about the All-Star game here, which has always been about, at least, you know, in the 2000s minimum, it's been about the high-scoring offense, and it's been about putting on a show. And Trae Young, he is a star. He's not the most popular star necessarily, and I know that the coaches are actually the ones that choose the reserves, and he was left out by the coaches, which could maybe tell you something about the brand of basketball that they think he puts out there. But nonetheless, back-to-back seasons, averaging 27 and 10 assists and not making the All-Star game, I feel like he should be a shoo-in here for being a replacement for either one of those injuries. And then I think it's that second spot that sort of has a little bit more of a debate behind it. You could go with Jimmy Butler, who we obviously know he's one of the best players in the NBA, but has missed a lot of time this season. You could potentially look to a Boston who, yes, they have the loss last night, but are the best record in the NBA, have tons of talent. You could even make an argument between two different players on the Celtics who could potentially make that replacement spot. But I would go with Scotty Barnes. And Scotty Barnes, I feel like, is somebody that's sort of been flying under the radar a little bit, because it's not like he plays the flashiest game necessarily. He plays on a Toronto Raptors team that doesn't get a ton of coverage, and they haven't been very good. The Raptors were in a weird spot coming into the season where they were sort of undecided on what direction they wanted to go. Are they still trying to compete at a high level? Are they going to rebuild? They sort of botched, in my opinion, the way that they went about this over the past 12 months, where they let Fred VanVleet walk for nothing. They were reportedly offered 3-4 first-round picks for OG Anunoby and didn't let him go. And then they just sort of, all of this happened. Pascal comes into the final year of his contract, and he's not really quite as sought after as an asset because of the lack of contract stability in that. He says he wants to hit free agency. Now, they did what they could to sort of make up for this, and I think that ultimately they've picked a direction, and it's fine. It's maybe not the full package that they could have gotten if they had moved earlier, but all this being said, I think that this just contributes to sort of the lack of respect maybe that the Toronto Raptors have gotten, and as a result, the lack of recognition that Scotty Barnes has been getting for the play that he's putting out there. I think that he's very much improved this year, specifically from the three-point line, which I know that it's sort of just reductive to only talk about the three-point line, but obviously this was standing out as a hole in his game. He's now shooting a career-high 36% from three, and what's really stuck out to me about Scotty Barnes this year is the way that in these crunch time minutes, he actually elevates his game. The Raptors have been in a lot of crunch time possessions because, again, they're not a great team, but they are a competitive team, and they are in a lot of these games. And what surprised me is the fact that Scotty Barnes has been able to be that guy for the Raptors, kind of more so. I like Fred VanVleet a lot, but I do think that there's a little bit of something when he is your best player, you're playing in a half-court slowed down game, how much he going to be able to be the leader to elevate you. He was phenomenal in the 2019 finals run for the Raptors, but not really quite a true alpha, I think, in crunch time situations, and I think that Scotty Barnes is sort of elevating himself closer to that. He's shooting 5.3 threes a game while shooting this career-high three-point percentage. In the final 5 minutes of 5-point games, he's actually elevated that to even 43% from three. And as a whole, he's averaging 28 and 5 on the season. You know, these other names that I've sort of thrown out there with the Jimmy Butlers, with some of the Celtics options, I think that availability is just sort of what should drive Scotty Barnes to end up taking this spot, as he's played in all 47 of Toronto's games. Jimmy Butler has played in 33 of 48. He's missed 15 games. Kristaps Porzingis, he's missed 15 games for the Celtics. So I think that Scotty Barnes is the deserving last replacement, at least as it stands now, where we need two in the East. Now, just bigger picture, snub talk as a whole, I think that the Western Conference is really where I look at the snub conversation, because yes, the Minnesota Timberwolves are the number one seed in the Western Conference. They have the second best record in the league, but I do not think that Karl Anthony Towns should have been selected as an all-star over Domantas Sabonis, especially considering the Kings have 0 all-stars despite how good they have been this season. And it's not like the Kings are necessarily surprising anybody anymore that they're a good team, but still to have neither De'Aaron Fox or Domantas Sabonis as an all-star. And granted, the Western Conference, the race for this all-star selection, I think, was a lot more jam-packed than it was in the Eastern Conference. But to leave out both of those players while the Kings are a top 5 seed in the West, they are 27 and 19, and Sabonis is averaging 20, 13, and 8. He's leading the league in rebounding. He's playing really good basketball. Fox is also having a tremendous season too, so if you would like to argue that it should be De'Aaron Fox over Karl Anthony Towns, I could be on board with that as well. To be honest, I don't think that Karl Anthony Towns is the second most valuable player on his team. I think it's Rudy Gobert. When it comes to the All-Star game and sort of the showmanship of it all, I'm not surprised that Rudy Gobert didn't make the All-Star game, and I'm not necessarily advocating that he should have made it over these Kings players either. But I think that it's just sort of towards the argument as a whole of the Timberwolves shouldn't have had 2 All-Stars over 0 for the Kings. And I like watching the Timberwolves. They are a lot of fun. They've been a good story this year. They've been very entertaining from some of the drama standpoint of it as well. But I think that the Kings are just a very solid team. They deserve to be represented in these all-star games, and to have neither Sabonis or Fox is a mistake. Now, other than that, I don't think that there was really any outstanding snubs. Lauri Markkanen's having a great season for the Jazz, but the Jazz are right on the brink of being a lottery team versus a play-in team right now. Brandon Ingram or Zion. Zion's missed more games, but he is the leading scorer on a Pelicans team that's also been pretty fun to watch this year. Ingram's been the more consistent factor, but I don't think that he necessarily deserved it either. My main gripe with this would be Karl Anthony Towns over Sabonis. And then as we are rearing up for this first break, I'm curious what the public thinks on whether or not Trae Young was a snub. Now, it's something we don't even have to necessarily argue about as a whole because of the fact that he is likely going to make it as a replacement. But had this not been the case, Trae Young would have been the only player in NBA history to average 27 and 10 with I believe the threshold is 55% true shooting percentage, and to not make the All-Star game. That would have happened twice now. Or effective field goal percentage, one of those. Again, it's a little bit of a cherry-picked stat, but it just goes to show that Trae Young doesn't really get a lot of respect around the league, and I'm just a little curious as to why that is, but I also don't know if I would have really put him over any of the other guys. Maybe Paolo, but the Magic have been very good this year. Paolo in crunch time has been huge for them and a big part of their defensive two-way identity. So I think that they got it right for the most part. Other than, again, my one gripe about Karl Anthony Towns. But that is all I have on the All-Star game. We're going to be taking a quick break, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to be talking LeBron James and the Lakers. So stick with us.